Welcome to the Funnel Reboot podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Whether you are joining us for the first time or the 205th time, thank you for coming to the podcast for analytically minded marketers. Let's get straight into today's show. In a few short years, AI has moved to the forefront of our lives. Since the 2022 release of ChatGPT version 3, we've gotten used to using OpenAI's tools and many others for a lot of tasks that involve communicating and writing. However, lots of marketers point out that our goal is greater than just churning out words. Our communications have to ring true with how people perceive our brand. It must sound authentic and, when the buyer's ready, persuade them to trust in us. Marketers are caught in a dilemma here on how they'll approach the tasks that they tackle each and every day. Knowing which tasks Gen AI is good at and which ones should be deliberately kept to humans can make all the difference. Our guest today knows something about how to make that decision. He's founder and president of Flight New Media, a digital agency. He founded the Agents of Change, which is a weekly podcast that now has over 550 episodes. He's a nationally recognized speaker on using digital channels like search, social media, and mobile for marketing to an audience. And he also hosts the Agents of Change conference, which is going to take place this year on October 9th and 10th, virtually and in Portland, Maine. If there is uniformity to the marketing tasks you do or that you delegate to others, you'll want to listen to what our guest does. Let's go now to Portland, Maine to talk with Rich Brooks.
Rich Brooks, welcome back to Funnel Reboot.
I am so glad to be back. I love what you've done with the place, Glenn. It really looks fantastic.
I tried to spruce it up for you, Rich.
It really makes a difference. The rug really ties the room together.
Oh, the beauty of an audio format. So, Rich, we talked way back in our first podcast, and I want to say it was early 2021, and we were talking about a book you'd come out with a little while before that called The Lead Machine. And it just so happens that we're going to be talking a little bit more about machines today. But the type that we're going to be talking about are AI, because we're recording here in mid-2024. And of course, you just have to talk about it because it's everywhere. So maybe I'll start with this question. When you are trying to give a very simple and Rich Brooks definition of what AI is, can you tell me how you see it?
I see it as a great assistant as it is right now. It's just a way, it's another voice in the room. It's another tool that we can use as marketers and obviously well beyond marketing, but that's my world, to just produce better content. And that's how I choose to use it.
Yeah. And
was that too simple? Was that too simple an answer?
No, I don't think so, because it's a nice foundation in that you've completely sidestepped the whole will it replace us or not. Because, if you say it's an assistant and we work on that premise, then I realize that, we have to be the ones working it. It's an instrument. It is something that, we're going to be the person playing.
Yes, I think that's key, because I do think that some people believe it can create an entire orchestra piece all by itself, composition and every other instrument. And I think that that is just the wrong approach to take. Now, obviously, technology advances. That may sound very quaint 6 months from now, but for where we are right now, this should only be seen as a tool that we can use to become better at our jobs.
And the jobs that you're talking about, because you are the head of an agency, so let's begin within that setting. I take it you still have all the staff that you did before ChatGPT came out. So,
yes.
Right? So you have clearly within the confines of an agency seen things that you do for customers, and you found ways to use AI, for whether it's web design or PR or content in a, long form or short form on social media. Can you, if we were in Portland, Maine, and I were walking around in the agency today, could you maybe give me the quick tour of just some generic things that you are finding it's being used for in the agency?
Yeah, and I'll be honest that I'm really the one who's pushing most of the use of AI, trying to get my team more excited about it. And I came back. I went to a conference last year. I'm going again. It's called MACON, the Marketing AI Conference. It's held in Cleveland. And I came back realizing that even though I thought I was ahead of the curve, there were so many people who were well ahead of me, which is fine. But I've been in this situation, having run my agency for now over 27 years, where anytime I thought things had settled and would be the same, that's always when I got, caught. And so I didn't want that to happen with AI. And I wanted to come back to my team and explain how we were going to use it. But I also wanted to make sure that everybody understood that their job was not under threat. I had definitely spoken even to some agency owners there who had already started to let members of their team go because of how AI was helping them become more productive. That's just not who I am. I'm not saying that that's a good or a bad thing. It's just not how I choose to run my agency. But I did say that if we want to remain competitive and if people like working here and like the clients that we have, then we have to learn how to use these tools. And we have to figure out how do they fit into our workflow? What can they do? What can't they do? And what is maybe an unethical way of using it that we need to avoid? Because there's certainly people out there. I mean, you go onto YouTube and you see people creating, websites and with one prompt and, all these sorts of crazy things. Write a book with one prompt. I'm like, how good could that book actually be? So that's not the agency I want to be. That's not the work that I want to put out into the world. But I do see the value of understanding how AI can make, and I think I'm a damn good writer, Glenn. I mean, I really love my writing. Mm-hmm. How can AI make me a better writer? And there's definitely a couple ways that I've worked it into my own workflow that makes it better. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah. So taking some of the writing that you're doing, can you give us, pop open the hood, give us a sense of maybe where you are dropping the thoughts or maybe kicking thoughts around? Where are you coming into actual drafting and then, tidying up and editing? Just give us a sense of what that looks like with AI in the mix.
Absolutely. Right now, I'm working on an article all about email marketing KPIs, something that I could easily write without the help of AI. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to, in part because I'm also trying to figure out the SOPs for using AI for the company and for our blog. We have a number of people who write blog posts at this point for our company. And so I started off with, and our normal process is we do a little bit of SEO work to understand what are the searches being done. So how do we kind of craft our message? We also know who our ideal customer is, which is directors of marketing and marketing managers within small to medium-sized businesses. So we know who we're writing for. So I go to ChatGPT and I ask it to, give me a framework based on our brand voice, based on our ideal customer persona, a robust guide to understanding and improving email marketing KPIs. And all I want is the framework. And the reason I want this is because I know I can write it and I can add my own personal experiences to it. But I also want to make sure that I haven't forgotten something key. And I think that's one great use for me, at least, for AI is we often have blind spots and of course you can't see them. Yeah. But ChatGPT is being trained on all these other articles, resources, whatever. It knows how to put together the framework, in my opinion, of a good blog post. And so that's where it starts. And even then I might refine it. I might say, well, again, this is who the audience is and the size of the company is this. Is this really the content that's going to help them do their job? So it might revise that a little bit. So now I have this framework to work off of. Sometimes I actually don't even use that framework. In this case, I used some of it because I just wanted that starting point. So I've got some of the keywords that we're going to go after. I also use another tool called Market Muse, which is an AI-powered tool. And that one helps me by doing research. It finds the top 20 results for pages that rank for email marketing KPI in this example. Yep. And it gives me an idea of what words that they're using, how often they're using them. And that will also help kind of build out the content on the page because I know what it's going to take to likely rank for the content that we're doing, because it's not going to be just email marketing KPI for search terms. There'll be other related terms as well. So, things like open rate or things like spam or whatever it would be are all going to be words that are used by top performing pages. So I know the kind of topics that I need to create. One of the things that Google has told us, first it said, we don't care if it's AI created content. We only want the most valuable content on the web. But then a month later, they turn around and they say, we're really going to prioritize content with personal expertise, which is one thing that AI can never have, right? So I make sure that I spin my own stories and experiences into this article while always keeping an eye on that framework and the keywords that I'm targeting. When I finish this article, and I'm also probably going to I already have collected a couple of expert quotes from people in and outside of my company to help kind of really make this the best post I can make it, get some screen grabs, all that sort of stuff. I may have an image created by AI because I have this visual in my head that I've been working on, put that all together, and then I might either feed it back to ChatGPT and ask for feedback on it, or maybe I'll go over to Claude and get a second AI opinion. How might you improve this article? And then I've got that draft that now I'm ready to go and publish. So the productivity gains for me are small because I'm still writing everything from scratch. I know some people are just happy to do a prompt and be done with it. That's not who I am. But this does help me write the best possible article that I can that will hopefully rank well and hopefully address the pain points of Flight's ideal customers.
That's really good. So a couple quick things that I'm just absolutely dying to know in that process, because I'm probably going to steal it.
Please go ahead. I did not invent it.
So the framework, to me, it sounded like you're running through that. It's giving, I'll call it an outline. I don't know if that's fair, but right. And the main thing that it would help, I think, with is, am I missing something, right? Can I speak about this topic, en masse, but, if I omit something very important, I'll look like I'm silly. So I better make sure if it notices those things and I say, oh, I wasn't going to talk about that. So I'm then able to add it. And then you said you needed to bring in some of your own expertise. So I'm hearing anecdotes, and you are doing it in a way that, maybe resonates with the persona because it's, about an area that maybe they haven't experienced that yet, but you have. And so here's what you found out as you were doing it. But there's another side of this, and it comes through the way you talk. And I'm interested in hearing if there is someone who wants to have pieces of the actual article itself written. I think the main thing that all of us clash with there is the voice. Because to me, at least with ChatGPT, compared to my personal style, it kind of sounds like an overcaffeinated teenager compared to the way I talk. So how can
I'll tell you how I trained it in my voice, but I will say that it's not perfect. And I'll give a very good example. So as an experiment, I decided to write an article on Google Tag Manager, something that I don't know as much about. So what I did is I basically gave it similar prompts, but what I had also done is this was for a short period of time. I don't think you can do this anymore. You could create custom GPTs. So what I did in ChatGPT is I uploaded a copy of my book, The Lead Machine, which you referenced earlier. I uploaded a copy of my most recent keynote presentation, The Remarkability Formula. I scraped 2 years of Facebook posts and LinkedIn posts by me and uploaded them. And then I said, tell me about the person who wrote this tell me about their writing style. And ChatGPT gave me a breakdown of my writing style. I gave it some feedback on where I thought maybe it missed the mark. And then I basically called that, what would the Rich Brooks do? And so anytime I wanted to write in my voice, I could go to that and say, use this ChatGPT, this custom GPT, to write in my voice.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where the problems began. So it did sound like me. But one of the things that I often do is I write in metaphors, and I talk in metaphors too. I'm always explaining things to people using terminology that they understand.
Yeah.
Well, kind of like you said, over-caffeinated teenager, it put in so many metaphors that literally there was almost nothing left. And I took out about 60% of the metaphors, just like deleted them out of the article. And then when I was done, I handed it off to my team, asking them, A, was it accurate? And B, did it sound like me? And the first thing they said is there's too many metaphors. And this was after I took out 60% of the metaphors that were already in there. So this was problematic. It sounded like me, but it really was like almost like more of a parroting of me rather than sounding like me. I've done some more research, and a couple of things that I've done, and I haven't had enough time to fully test this out. But one thing that I've realized is I may have given it too much content because there's only so much memory storage, although the latest version of ChatGPT 4.0 has so much storage. But even that, I was reading online that you can only give it so much information before it starts to kind of forget things to make room for new things.
Yeah.
So I think of it now like I went back and I started doing this again. And the improvements are, one is really think about this like a portfolio. Maybe grab the favorite chapter of your book and maybe grab a few different samples. So when I did this again, I uploaded like 2 or 3 email newsletters that I had recently written. And I explained to ChatGPT, this is an email newsletter and this is the purpose. This is a blog post I wrote, and this is the purpose. This is the audience. This is a chapter of my book. And this, so I tried to give it as much context. And then I also gave it a synopsis of my own voice based on what it had given me. And then I cleaned it up a little bit. So it's writing in my style. And also this way, it still can grab snippets of how you write and your sentence structure. So it knows, like, I like to use a lot of dry humor. I always like, but I told it, like, I like to use humor. It said self-deprecating humor, which I would say is true. I said, I never punch down at other people. Like, that's one of my things. It's like, I'll punch up, but I'll never punch down. Yep. So I trained it, and now it's doing a little bit better, but I haven't had enough experience to say like, oh, I've cracked the code or anything like that. But I think focusing more on their portfolio and then giving it more direction on what the purposes of different writing styles are for, and then giving it like a cheat sheet, an overview of your voice, your tone, your sentence structure, those sort of things, all that gets to a better version for you. But I'll still say that's probably better for a brand voice than a personal voice. Like, I can teach it probably and feel more comfortable talking about how does Flight New Media sound, or how does the Agents of Change sound? What's their brand voice versus what is Rich Brooks's voice? Because I told a story that in this article that I'm writing on email marketing about just this funny anecdote about how I said, please come to, I was just nominated to this board for socially responsible businesses. Please come and stop them before they've gone too far and let me on the board. And it was this whole thing about how, like, I was chopping down trees with owls in my backyard just the other day to put in a gas-powered hot tub or something like that. Like, ChatGPT is not going to come up with that, right? That's super sarcastic, inside baseball Rich Brooks jokes. But by understanding kind of some of that, it can maybe start to mimic some of that. And then I go in and I added in the real story, the real anecdote, and people recognize this is Rich Brooks. And in some ways, that's no different than using Word or Grammarly to improve something. So yes, you can use one prompt and get a whole bunch of content out there and just add to that garbage pile of content that's out there on the web. Or you can figure out, how do I use this tool to become the best damn marketer, writer, whatever you want to do, that I can possibly be. And that's how I choose to use it.
I really like that. And I agree with you that we do have to at least nail it for things like brand voice. But let's not kid ourselves. It is not yet at the point where, look at the way that we communicate on the web. Here after a few decades, we've developed emojis and, we've got acronyms like if you know, you know. And when you put that in front of a certain line, it changes the meaning diametrically. You are now, way on the other side. So I really liked what you said when you were saying that you could upload stuff to it, but you've got to give it that kind of context. And I guess in two ways, here's why I'm telling you this, but also I'm telling you this because I'm about to ask you to give me something important, and I want it to be most recent and fresh in your mind, what I'm just giving you here for that answer there. So don't just, as you said, don't just give it, everything you've ever done, because it will not be able to understand how it's supposed to use that. And the results obviously going to be suboptimal.
Yeah. Use that portfolio approach. What's your best writing, the best examples of your writing from different styles? That I think is likely to give you the best output.
Yeah. And I'm imagining if you have, let's say, something persuasive that you need to write, then you'll go to that part of the portfolio and say, these are my best examples of when I've written compelling copy. And,
Right.
here are some other times where I've done dry, product description copy. Like there's different writings for different things.
Absolutely.
Cool. I want to take a second and talk about when we're summarizing things. So let's imagine you've already written it, and now the article is about to go, but you want to have a couple of lead-ins. You want to have a couple of social teasers that you put out so people will come and read this article that you've written. Do you find it good for that?
Yeah. In fact, I was just, because I had done something similar for my podcast, and I just decided to redo it because I found that the more I was using it, the less I liked it. So I decided to take that same portfolio approach with the new aGPT 4.0 the other day. And so for me, I record these podcasts, and I now use Fathom, which is just absolutely brilliant for, not just getting the entire transcript, but also creating a summary and to-do lists, which is fantastic when these are sales calls. But when I'm doing the podcast, I use Fathom. It transcribes everything. It gives me a summary. And then I take that and I upload it. I upload the transcript actually into ChatGPT. And I'm now building out what's called a prompt library. So I can just use it again and again.
Yes.
So I've got these documents outside. And I won't read the whole thing, but I just pulled it up. I upload the transcript and I say, you are provided with the transcript of an episode of the Agents of Change podcast. Use the information in the transcript to create the following. 1, SEO title for the show notes page. The title should end with guest name. 2, meta description for the show page. 5 takeaway points. Email promoting the episode, including strong. So I literally spell out everything I want. And then I get the final document from it. And the first time I did this, when I didn't like what I got, I went back and I reprompted it until I got a prompt that gave me not exactly what I was looking for, but something that I could work with. And so that's another iteration. I think the summarizations are fantastic, and it's helped me a lot in terms of creating the intros and the outros to the show notes, specifically the emails, although I end up writing my own. But again, I see this more as a starting point for anything else. But if you're in a rush, or maybe there's some sort of content that's more commodity content rather than creative content, I think you could probably get away with, just doing a quick pass over it and making sure it doesn't say anything that you really don't agree with. Because sometimes AI will totally mess things up. I was just doing a presentation recently showing this very cool tool called Lumen 5 and how it basically can create, through its own stock photos and stock video, these great explainer videos. And I had created this fake event space called The Warehouse, and the script was brilliant and everything was wonderful. And I showed it at this presentation. And in the last few seconds, it shows this actual warehouse with bloody mattresses. It looks like a scene out of Saw after all the beautiful images it had just shown. And the audience, who are event planners, erupts into laughter. And I'm like, what did I miss? And so it was like, this is why you have to check the work of AI, because it heard the word warehouse and it pulled its images from warehouses that it had in stock videos, and it brought us this. Obviously, that's not on brand, right? So you always have to be checking your work or checking AI's work, or else you could end up in a lot of hot water. But it got me a lot of the way there, and then I could just swap out that video clip with one that maybe I created myself or another one from their library. But you just can't let these things run on autopilot right now.
Yeah.
And maybe ever.
Well, good point. So just to clarify, when you said I ask it again, so I take it you don't just repeat the actual prompt. Are you kind of like as a director would in a scene, in Hollywood. They're like going to the actors and saying, okay, now again, but this time, tell me, are
So it
you getting
depends,
that
right?
deep, or are you just telling it, no, I just want you to regenerate?
So on the email KPI blog, I originally just asked it to give me, I said, you're a renowned email marketing expert. You've been tasked to write the ultimate guide to email marketing KPIs, what's important, how to track, how to improve your results. Please create an outline for this article. And it did. And when it was done, I came back to it and I said, the audience of the blog post are marketing professionals and are owners of SMBs. With that in mind, would you make changes to the outline above? So this is the iterative process that you were just talking about, giving the actor more information so you can get a different result out of it. And as my friend Andy Crestodina says, it's called Chat GPT for a reason. But when I was doing the podcast descriptions, teaching it how to create the assets for my podcast, that I was literally starting a new one each time because I was trying to come up with the perfect prompt so that I could use it every time. So in that case, I basically just start a new chat every time to see if it came closer to what I envisioned in my head.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that is I find sometimes you need to explain to it where the piece of writing that you want from it is going to go. So you can't, like, I found when it just summarizes something, okay, that doesn't make a good lead in, because that's like telling somebody everything that's happened in a book, including the spoilers. So like, I need to say, this is what's going to come before. This is only to get them interested so that they will click the link and read or listen. So I tell it what not to put in. I tell it what to try to focus on and how vague to be, because that's sometimes what we want too.
Right. There are times, especially when it comes to AI image creators, I will go with a ridiculously broad, vague prompt because I'm just kind of curious to see what it comes up with. And other times where I'm writing out the Great American Novel to try and get this image exactly the way it looks in my head.
Yeah. And so again, back to the person, the person playing the instrument, not just the instrument. Think about what you want, right? I want to cover a little bit more of how you use it, because you did mention something about events there, and I know that you've got some great ways of helping think about how AI can be used to promote events. But before we do that, we're going to take a really short break.
I'll step away to address one thing that's been missing from Funnel Reboot: the ability to access the text of any show. I'm glad to finally announce that the podcast is now fully searchable and copyable thanks to the transcript feature in YouTube. Yes, YouTube. Now, if shows are audio only, they are all on YouTube. Whether you're looking for a specific episode, a topic, or want to search the full text of a show for a specific part, go on to YouTube, head to Funnel Reboot's channel. Okay, now let's get back to the show.
So, Rich, I think I heard somewhere that you know a thing or two about events, and I want to hear what you've collected in terms of some ways that AI can be used to save us some of the drudgery and maybe even help us put on a better event by using some of the tools and some of the hacks that you've come up with.
Well, I guess a lot, in terms of putting on the event, I'm not sure how I've used it to actually put on the event, but in terms of promoting the event, I would say that it's similar to a lot of the things that we've already discussed. In terms of, it's a great tool to help you write some of those emails. And we all know there's different types of email styles or different types of marketing as well. And there's that agitate, I always forget the acronym, but, that kind of like gets people, thinking about the problems and then how you can explain how you can solve them, things like that. So you can tell it that, again, explaining who your audience is, your ideal customer, train it up in your brand voice, and then say, I need an email newsletter that's going to promote a $50 off, only good through Saturday email that's going to get people to take action. I need a strong subject line with an appropriate emoji. I need strong calls to action. And here's the information for the event. Go for it. And so that's one way that, because I don't always write the best salesy emails, but I know what's supposed to go in them. So that might be an area that AI could really help me with, where my emails tend to be a little bit more conversational. So I find that AI can really help in places where you might not be so strong. So that's one way that I might be able to use it. And I can also say, if I have a document or a guidebook on landing pages or on conversion techniques, I might feed it that article or that blog post or whatever and say, based on this list, based on this article, rewrite the content for an audience, for this audience. So that's where a lot of the image or the content creation aspects might come in. I'm sure there are people who are event specialists who have figured out exactly how to optimize, where each speaker goes in each room and what time of day is going to be the best for them. That's a little bit beyond what I'm trying to accomplish right now.
Of course.
But those are some things that we take a look at. And obviously, I think AI is critically important. When we came back with our Agents of Change conference after COVID, we redesigned our agents. We had search, social, and mobile as three of the agents, these agents of change. We came back and we added three new ones: neuro, short for neuromarketing, because I think psychology is fascinating, AI, and then blockchain. And so now we have this lineup of 6 marketing superheroes, so to speak, these agents of change. So I recognize how critical it is. And we actually just put on our first virtual summit ever. We had 30 speakers over 3 days. And although only 1 or 2 speakers were specifically talking about AI was in almost every single presentation that was given. Like branding, here's where AI fits in. Instagram, here's how I use AI. So I recognize how critical this is to almost everything that we're doing right now. And that does include like promoting events, putting on events, creating the content, the workflow, and everything like that. We even use AI to help us with creating standard operating procedures, SOPs. We'll tell it what we want to accomplish, and we'll ask it to generate an SOP for us. And then we have to tweak it, because obviously it's just using some best practices. It's not really knowing all the nuances of our business, but it helps us in terms of, here's a typical pathway, and then we can basically create a path that makes sense for us based on that.
Yeah, and that's a great one with SOPs. Obviously, if we're going to be doing things like you would in an agency where it's being repeated and you want the quality to be there for all of the things, you want to have a standard way of doing it. One of the things that I see promise in, although I'm going to tell you I don't see it there just yet, is being able to use tools like Zapier to tie together different AI tools so that the output of one can become the input for the next tool in that SOP chain. I see the promise. I really see it coming. As you said, we've seen like custom GPTs, briefly come out, briefly go away, but all of the large vendors are working on ways to make these things so that they can actually be agents. They can actually take action.
Yeah, which, is both cool and also a little creepy, because there's definitely reasons why they built in some of the limitations, although perhaps not enough limitations. But I do agree that connecting these different tools could have great outcomes. And even sometimes when I'm using ChatGPT, now that they've integrated DALL-E, their image creator, into it, I'll notice that sometimes I won't even ask for it, but will create an appropriate image for whatever the task is that I want to do. So I only expect to see more than that. And one thing, Glenn, that could definitely help with events, but also help with all of our marketing, is leveraging AI to create buyer personas. And this is something.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, this is something that I've started to do. And it was the first time I saw it. Again, want to give props where they're due. Andy Christodina showed me how to do this. But basically, he would go in and he would describe his ideal customer or his client's ideal customers, and just, give it some information like, you are the director of marketing for a mid-sized manufacturing company in Maine. You have a team of 3, and your business clears $10 million a year. Create a persona based on this. And it will go ahead and it will give this person a name. It will give a background, where they went to school, all this sort of stuff. And then you can start asking it questions like, how do you get information? I did this for the event group, this event camp I spoke at. And I said, I want, create a high-end wedding planner who handles like celebrities and destination weddings. And they created this character for me. And then we just started asking questions like, where do you go for information? How do you learn about new venues? What are your pain points? Like all the things that we wish we could ask our clients. Now, the caveat here is the old garbage in, garbage out. If I don't really know my ideal customer persona, then this could really just be spewing out garbage. But, if I really have a good handle on who that person is, or who I want to go after, then it really can give me some good insights on the influencers that they might follow. One of my favorite things is what Google searches would they be doing to help them get better at their job? Because that means I should be creating content that answers that, right? And things like that. So those are the kind of things to really get a better understanding. What I haven't done yet, but we are starting to, is interview stakeholders with the same questions to each one, and then feed that into ChatGPT as more reference points and more data, and more real world data. So it's not just painting this picture, it's actually taking the words and the pain points if I've asked the right questions. So now what we can do is we can interview 5, 10, 15 stakeholders, get that data, feed it into an AI tool like ChatGPT, have it create a more accurate persona, assuming that our current client base is where we want to stay. And then we can start asking it questions about pain points. And then we can start asking it questions about how it finds a new vendor, or what would cause it to leave its old vendor, or whatever the case may be. And I think that is just, especially for people who are maybe not so well versed in buyer personas, that's a huge step up. And all of a sudden, you can say, I want to write an article on email marketing KPIs, but I want to write it for this particular audience. Like if it gave it the name, Jane Smith, I want to write an article that Jane Smith, it's going to change the way she does her email marketing. And we know about Jane Smith, then I feel that article is going to be much more valuable to my ideal my ICP.
Sure. It would have to be.
You would hope, right? That's the dream. Yeah.
No, that's very cool to think that we can kind of jump back and forth from, art describing life, describing art, with really, survey in, description out, and then back into, okay, well, how would I write this? And what would you suggest I write about that would really help this person? That's great. The other one that I can't help but think of is in an earned media situation. If I'm looking to get into a certain publication, or to have a guest blog on a certain site, or dare I say, even manage to become a guest on a podcast, I could do that same type of thing, saying, this is what they're like, this is who they normally put in. Now tell me what commonalities you think I'd have to have for what I'm putting in to be accepted. And so you might, I know the minute I said this, Rich, you might be now thinking, I have a form on my website that asks people to come on to the Agents of Change podcast. I wonder how many of those are AI generated.
Right. Well,
you never know.
And the thing is, I think all your questions are great. I hadn't really thought about it, the way that you would approach that. And the only other question that I might ask ChatGPT is, what gaps are there? What topics haven't they covered that I should suggest that we talk about? Because maybe they've done if it's an email marketing one, maybe they've talked about all these different topics around subject lines and from lines and all this sort of stuff, but they never talked about deliverability. Well, all of a sudden that becomes a topic that they need an expert on. And then if you can speak to that, you can be like, look, I have all this email expertise and I really focus on deliverability. Well, now all of a sudden you become a much more intriguing guest to that host.
Excellent point. And I don't know about you, I would stare for hours at their, list of existing or past speakers, and I wouldn't see that. Right. But if I can feed that in and get that would.
Right. Because the human brain is not good at seeing blind spots. Right. We said so. But ChatGPT has so much more data, access to data than we do. So it's going to see what's typical and what's not there. So it can see those blind spots that we probably can't see ourselves.
For sure. I do have to mention there's another way to do all of this, noticing a patterns around text. And if I could channel him for a minute, somebody that we both know, Christopher Penn, if he were here right now, he would be saying, yeah, but you can also, if you're fairly good at using analytics, and you can, maybe even write a little bit of stuff in code. You can feed the data in. And, if we think about ChatGPT, they tell us it breaks things down into tokens, right? So it's really doing next word prediction out of analyzing a whole bunch of words. So Christopher Penn, if he were here, would say, but there's also a ton of analysis and, frankly, AI or machine learning managed word dicing that gives us things like, oh, well, it didn't say this, or compared to these other websites that talk about it, this site is missing that kind of verbiage, those keywords. So there's a whole other way to do it. I think you and I are both kind of doing it on a layman's terms, but there are people like Chris out there that can do it, at a much more.
If Chris Penn was on this podcast, I wouldn't have anything to say. He's so next level. I would just be sitting here taking notes.
Well, it's a good thing that I did have him on the podcast and he did talk about it there. So
excellent. Well, now I got to go check out that episode.
Right. But there's, I'm just saying, there's so many ways to skin this cat. So, Rich, can you tell me, when you look ahead a little bit and you try to gaze into that crystal ball on, I think you pointed out a little while back that there is a fair number of websites out there that are simply taking generative text straight out of ChatGPT or other tool and dumping it out there. So we're now in a environment where a lot of people are using it and they're not being as scrupulous as you are. And I'm kind of interested in knowing, how do you see us managing in a world of the search engines less so giving us the link to the site that would have this great information, or in a world where there's a whole lot of sites, including yours, that are talking about something, but yours is the one that is most human and theirs are less? What does that landscape look like for marketers?
It's such an interesting question that you asked, Glenn, and I'm actually putting together a presentation right now for an upcoming talk on the impact of AI and SEO. And it's so hard to put together because every day there's a new piece of information, right? So you're referencing Google's what they call SGE, or Search Generated Experience, which is basically all the hard work that we've put together as content creators and shared with Google over the years. It's now just taking it, summarizing everything. Maybe if we're lucky, it will link off to our website. But mostly, and this is what they just came out like a week or two ago and said this, like, we're going to be doing more with SGE, and then we're also going to be selling more ads underneath. So basically, if I go there and I ask a question about, I don't even know, like boats. I happen to be looking outside. There's a boat there. Like question about boats. It's going to give me a generative response based on all this other content it's scraped off the web. Again, maybe linking to some of these websites. Giving me a breakdown of like how to buy a boat, whatever it may be. And then it's going to have basically ads for boats underneath. Well, that's terrible for most of us, right? It may be great for Google. It might be good for the end user, which is what they claim. I might disagree about that, but this is problematic in my mind. This is the first time in 27 years where I've started to really question if we need to be moving away from organic SEO. If this is actually the way the output it becomes, because I think this is a terrible experience in the long run for people who are just looking to get information. And it would cause people to not feel like they should be creating better content because Google's just going to craft something at the top of the page based on what they said. So I am concerned about this. And it does mean that probably we're going to, and years ago I said, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. Obviously I wasn't the first person to say that, but when it comes to SEO, like SEO is one pathway and an incredibly important pathway to our websites. But depending on the type of content you have, the type of business you are, you will definitely see, and we're seeing this across the board with all of our clients, less SEO traffic. And we already know that more than half of the searches done at Google don't lead to a click. They're called zero-click searches because Google, and this was before SGE, is providing all that information. So what can you do? Well, it's tricky, but one of the things I'm actually thinking about is getting back into organic social. I mean, I was a huge fan of organic social, and then it became overcrowded. And so I also felt like those platforms weren't good for driving traffic. But now I have to kind of spread the love around and start thinking about, if I want to get people to my content, how am I going to do that? Podcasts are one, because really, you still find podcasts, quote unquote, the old fashioned way.
Yep.
Having an email newsletter where I get people to opt in. As long as I'm providing valuable content, they'll stick around. So that's another way that I can stay in touch with them. Yep. In-person events has always been part of what I do, and doing both networking events, but also getting on stage and presenting has always been one of the ways that I draw attention to Flight New Media and the Agents of Change. We'll continue to work with SEO and do all the things that we're supposed to do, but I'm continuing to expect that the ROI of SEO will become less and less. And there will only be a few people who are really getting the kind of results that we used to get through SEO. But then again, that's been true with every single channel that I've ever seen online.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that this is it takes two to tango issue. What I mean is that the search engines will try. I mean, you said, Google's recently announced this, and, I think this week they're calling it AI overviews, and it's still SGE in some places. But no matter what they call it, they are trying to help people who are using a search engine, maybe for their open discovery and their, give me some beginner's awareness on this issue, or maybe it's a product, but we might even be stepping farther back to where's my problem? What am I trying to solve for? I like what you said about organic social, because I got to think that humans are pretty complicated, and we will parry when we notice that the search engine is making adjustment. And what I found myself doing, not even realizing it at first, is I will hit the search engine, but then I'll look at it, kind of my eyes will glaze over, and then I'll say, I wonder what Rich is saying about this. And then, right? And then my mind then goes to, okay, where would I go to look? Maybe he's already said something about this, or maybe I know there's a lot of stuff on his site and on his channels, and then I just drift. And so that's what I think might happen, is dependent on what mode the person is in. Have they moved into shopping? Have they moved into, active consideration and actually deciding to change the status quo? Then they might move off of that.
Right. And I think that brings up an excellent point, Glenn, is that in the age of AI, perhaps personality wins. And I don't mean having the biggest personality in the room, but you mentioned Chris, you name-checked Chris Penn earlier. Yep. I name-checked Andy Crestodina twice. These are both people that we turn to as experts in the field.
Right there.
And, we want to be the Andy Crestodinas and the Chris Penns, or the Amy Porterfields and the John Lee Dumases of the world. They've established themselves as critical thinkers, as true creators, as people who are trusted. And maybe that's the right word. If you become a trusted advisor or a trusted authority in your niche, is the future of success. That's what success is going to look like. If you want to be able to funnel business to your company or to yourself, that you really need to build up that trust. And there are ways to leverage AI to do that, and there are ways to leverage AI to help. But the bottom line is, you're not going to do that by basically using AI to write your content. And you're going to get out there by pressing the flesh and showing up on podcasts and showing up on Zoom calls and doing what you can to establish your unique voice that will draw people in, whatever the size of that audience is. But that's what you have to nurture these days if you want to stay relevant in the age of AI.
It's all about staying human. And in a time when we cannot accurately say what's going to happen on all of this great digital stuff, we can at least say that humans are going to be human. So that's we can resort to that kind of flight to quality. Let's stick with the human side, do the human thing. At least we think that's going to have some legs for a while.
Right. Because if everybody can write the great American novel with a single prompt, then who's going to read all those great American novels, right? So at that point, maybe you should be trying to write the strangest American novel, or the weirdest American novel, or the most vulnerable American novel, because that's not something that ChatGPT can probably do.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that that's going to be true, at least until the time that this podcast comes out.
Right. Exactly.
Hey, Rich, you do a lot of things on the human side, including the Agents of Change conference and your podcast. Could you help people who want to find out about those things? Where would you point them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you like podcasts, and chances are you do because you're listening to Glenn's, you can check out my podcast. It comes out weekly. It's called The Agents of Change, and it's an interview show where I interview digital marketing experts in their niche so that you can reach and engage more of your audience online and grow professionally. New ones coming out every week. I've been doing it for over a decade. That's also the Agents of Change brand also covers our annual conference. This will be our 10th annual conference. We have it in Portland, Maine. It's going to be October 9th. And then we do deep dive workshops on October 10th. And that's up in Portland, Maine. Like I said, I would love to see people come out for this event. It really is a right-sized conference, if you will. We've got 15 amazing speakers coming and from all over the U.S. and Canada. And although most of the people are local, we do get people from around the country to check us out as well. And if you can't make it, we do have a virtual pass. All that information is available at our website. Depending on when this podcast comes out, there may be some early bird tickets still available. Oh. So go to theagentsofchange.com, check it out, sign up for the podcast, book your flights or your trips to Portland, Maine now. Honestly, this is my favorite place in the world. There's a reason why I call this place home. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's got some of the best restaurants in the world. Check us out.
I think you did it justice, Rich. And listen, thanks again for coming on the show.
I appreciate you being my hype man, Glenn. Really do.
Hey, no problem. Yeah, and I'm glad for all you do, Rich. I don't know how you do it, but I'm certainly glad that you are sharing with us as a guy who's a practitioner of this stuff, what you're seeing, and then you're so freely sharing of it, with all of us. So that's great. And to the listener, please take what Rich has given you today. Go out, use it for greater insights so that you can make your marketing even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter at Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.